Thanks for joining me. This is Elevate with Emily, and here I try to integrate gospel principles, Christianity, and therapeutic principles, and just try to create a well-balanced whole person, mind, body, spirit. And today we have Mark joining us, and I just want him to take a moment and introduce himself and what he does, because it's pretty incredible.
I have about 3 years being in the intentional health tech space.
You started navigating tech family. Can you tell me a little bit about what the mission or purpose of that is? And then what got you into that?
Yes. Our mission is to help individuals, families, companies, and nonprofits be more intentional with technology. Because as you know, and most people today, technology has some negative effects of it, but people just don't understand, but how do I navigate that? I mean, I understand there's effects of it, but how do I navigate that? And so personal side story is my little, when she was 2, she had some pretty severe medical trauma, unfortunately. And during that period, my wife, her only way to help her through that, in order to take the medication, which is pretty rough, even if they got sugar and everything else in it, is to use YouTube, popular social media platform. The content was okay, but I noticed as a parent and as a product marketing manager, that's one of my backgrounds, that she quickly wanted that device again and again, right? Or she threw a huge tantrum when we were saying, enough, right? Joycey, we've gone through the program, and so there was something to that. So that's how the journey started.
Have you noticed any impacts on your relationship with your wife or other aspects in your marriage from technology use? And how has that shaped how you use technology today?
Great question. Yes. So that's the other part, and it relates to what you do every day. And that's why I appreciate what you do, Emily, is that because we were intentional with technology and we weren't accessing social media all the time and doing different things when we had gone to our own faith-based counselors, it gave us enough room, like this tree behind me. So we're giving people enough room on the top, or we were given enough room on the top so we could get to, like what you said, the root cause, dealing with the mind, body, and spirit, right? Truly. And Emily, I can't tell you enough. I'm trying to not cry on a video deal, but it's definitely been a game changer. Oh, you're like, go ahead.
That's what I do. Please cry.
This is right. This is not a personal session. But yeah, so Emily, honestly, it's been a game changer. Yes, social media, there's so many voices, and it's designed to appeal to your weaknesses, or things that you struggle with. In fact, you just look at anybody's social media feeds, and you'll see right away what their weak areas are.
Right. I think I mentioned like YouTube thinks I'm Korean because if you go to my YouTube,
oh yeah, that's
it's
right.
Really like hot Korean boy bands. Like they know that I want to click on and watch all things related to K-dramas, K-pop.
Yes.
So some of my ads come up like in Korean. I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess YouTube.
Like, all right.
Sees me as Korean.
And you kind of look Korean-ish, so there you go. As somebody, a Japanese American who knows Koreans, but that's funny. And at the same time, the seriousness of it, unfortunately, as you know, is people that are dealing with struggles, mental health struggles, which everybody has a level of it today with technology.
Right, and even just I wanted, sorry to jump in, but I just wanted to catch this nugget that you had said, like as you're referring to that tree behind you over there. I think what keeps us from getting to the root of so much is distraction, disassociation, and that's at the heart of the matter of what I do in therapy, right? Is getting people in touch with their emotions and helping them face things that are so hard to face on their own. And when you have K-dramas, which is my weakness, or social media or YouTube videos or books and like all of these things that you can consume and it makes you feel good in that moment, it keeps you from getting to the root of things. And so I can see, like, even with you and your wife, how maybe it's just easier to be on your phones than connecting with each other. But when you took a more mindful approach and you're like, okay, we actually have to stare at each other and talk, not that happened, but it allows room for curiosity and for that deeper growth and connection to happen. And so many people are missing out because they just don't even realize how much technology is taking their time. I had to start tracking it because I'm like, Man, like my eyes are hurting after watching so many K-dramas. How many hours am I actually spending? I'm like, oh, okay, I
Right.
maybe
Oh no.
ignorance was
Oh
bliss
no.
because now I'm like, shoot, I cannot in good conscience like continue this habit. And so I love that.
Oh.
Just like that awareness is so key for change to happen.
And a couple of cool things that you just said. This is such a great conversation, Emily, because with your being vulnerable about your own personal situation, yeah, I mean that's what causes those things. And then also, in addition to that, there's a statistic out there, and you can look it up online. It talks
Mm-hmm.
about how you consume your lifespan time,
Mm.
and one of them is you spend 9 years of TV, social networking, and I think it's gaming or something like that. 9 years of your life doing that. So, and it's not that you can't do that. It's just, do you want to spend all of it if it's hindering your relationships with those you love? Because one other nugget I'll pull out, because I did senior care for a while in hospice, is that when people are in hospice services, Emily, and you might know this already, but they don't care about their last trip. In fact, at the rec center, this guy was talking about his Hawaii trip and he's posted about, they don't talk about that, right? At end of life, you know what they talk about, Emily? Is the relationships that they have or
Mm.
don't have, right? And so to drive it home, I mean, that's why I can be passionate about this space too, is because like you just said, the tree is a great example, is why not give yourself that thing that you deserve, which is right, just enough space to realize that you're missing out on the most important things in life, which is your family and your friends, right? And so
Yes.
you're helping people in that process, but they need enough room so that when I'm talking to Emily, I can be like, you know what, Emily's right. Versus like if I'm consumed with all this stuff and I hear all this stuff, I'm like, yeah, but this other therapist said this. It's like, no, go to Emily and but get rid of the distractions long enough, right? Honestly, so that the advice that Emily has can help my relationships and I don't miss out on 9 years of something that could have been beautiful,
Right.
right?
And
In
and
either
again,
way.
it's not
So
just me. It's not just Emily saying it. It is what the research is saying.
mm-hmm.
It's what you're finding.
Yes.
It's so
Mm-hmm.
many people on board with this, but it's so difficult. And I don't know, this just came to me, so I want to throw this out there as you're talking about end of life, what people are
Mm-hmm.
talking about. It brought me down to my generation, to these emerging adults and these young adults
Mm.
who what the biggest crisis is that we're facing right now is a loneliness pandemic. And I think that
Yeah.
is why when you think about how widespread technology has become and people are like, "Oh, then you can
Mm.
connect more with followers. You can call your friends more if they live, far away." Like it should bring more connection. But these other
Mm-hmm.
aspects of it, of social media, the comparison, not seeing the truth, just being bombarded, like literally they're buying your attention and they're feeding you with what
Yes.
you know they're shaping your worldview by what you're seeing. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of these things lead to disconnection between human to human, and that's what we are made, like God made us to
Yes. Mm-hmm.
connect human to human,
Mm-hmm.
heart to heart. And so no
Mm-hmm.
wonder there's this loneliness pandemic even in young adults and kids. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
always, I think, acknowledge that technology is a big reason of that. Not to say it's bad and needs to be destroyed, but again,
Right.
the intention of it and just being mindful.
Yeah, and that's a great point. In fact, I got a little, you can't really see it, but it's one of our big things that we push in our pillars of our program is hierarchy of valuable communication, meaning
Mm-hmm.
like first try to do in person, then next do a phone call, then next write a letter, and then everything else, including text messaging, which I'm pretty bad about. I still text message quite a bit. But
Because it's so
to your
convenient.
point, I know. To your point, well, and it's non-confrontational for me. But to your point, Emily, you're right. Is that that's one of the things in all the different researches, and you know this too, that people are realizing is that the face-to-face, and even there's a Harvard study I just thought of just now that they did years ago in which they discovered that typing notes on a laptop versus actually handwriting people
How
actually
much? Yeah,
comprehend information
memory.
better. Yeah. And so it's like, Emily, just getting back to what you're saying, the way we were created, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? It's like, it's amazing how things just kind of fall into place and there's not this anxiety and depression. In fact, one statistic here locally in the Treasure Valley that you wouldn't be aware of, but to help I guess, solidify what you're saying is that teen suicide here in the Treasure Valley, right here where I live in Nampa, Idaho, is one of the highest in the nation. And it's not publicized on the news or anywhere. It's like this hidden thing that people don't want to talk about because they don't know how to wrap their heads around it, right? And yet you and I are talking about this stuff because we realize there's tragedies happening like in my backyard. You know what I mean? And it's not something that we need to be quiet about, right? We need to educate people like what you're doing. So that's why, again, I'm really passionate about this and thankful for what you're doing because people don't realize in their own backyard, right, what's going on.
Yeah, it's easier to just live in our virtual worlds and put our head in the sand and ignore a lot of these problems if they're not directly impacting us. But I think there's so much here to be done that we can all do. And I kind of want to move on to like exactly how technology can be detrimental with doom scrolling or the addictive properties of it. And I know for me, I can get caught up in the black hole of doom or like the black hole of scrolling where you like pull out your phone and then you are meaning to text someone, but somehow you're scrolling through reels and then like 2 hours later you're like, oh shoot, there went my time to like do this thing.
Connect with somebody.
Yeah, or just get work done. But yeah, it almost like takes away from your agency, like your ability to choose. Like it almost just overtakes you sometimes, and you just get caught up as your brain gets like little dopamine hits, and then you're like, oh, I'm rewarded for seeing this funny meme. Just one more meme. Just one more meme. And then you know you walk away from it, and during that 2 hours scrolling session, you were feeling good, but then afterwards, what do you have to show for that? And you don't have the other necessary components to build up joy and good self-esteem, which is working hard and having things build on each other over time. And so then you're like, oh, that was kind of just wasted. Like, what do I have to show for that time? And then it can kind of make you feel worse than before. And so even just on your mood, temporarily instant gratification, but long term, that is not the route to happiness. So
right, and it leads to like what you're saying, high level of depression and anxiety, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you guys do what you do. And so touching on that, I appreciate that subject because on the social dilemma, the documentary that was done back in 2013, and just the trailer alone is great. And some key things that they said on it is that engineers actually go to school to study psychology and specifically get to the lower part of your brain to make things addictive. And it's not that they're tapping into your weaknesses, but they do things in a way that unfortunately you'll click on the weird things or things that you just struggle with. And so the other thing is that fake news actually spreads 6 times faster than real news, right?
Yeah.
And so all of these things to say, the other thing I wanted to mention is, speaking of what you said, so some of the questions that I ask people from this industry, because these are common questions that we ask from this space, is when you get off of tech, do you feel drained, mad, frustrated, or anything negative from it? So that's a good point. So if you get off and you're like, oh gosh, I'm frustrated because I just missed out on that appointment or that meeting, well, there's something to that, right? Another question to ask yourself is, can you leave your phone at home? Is it a necessity? Like you feel like you have to have it? The final one, which is probably a hard one for men more than women, I would think, is can you take a break from tech one day? Can you not watch the football games for one day? Because there's something, again, to that. It's not that you can't consume it, but if you feel like you have to have it, and which my wife and I are testimony of that, we don't always go with our phones. We leave them at home. And so it's really nice because we have that freedom of if the power goes out or if the internet goes out, we're not like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? We're like, oh, no, we've got stuff in place that we can still get in contact with people and we don't feel like we're in a panic, to your point. So.
Yeah, but I almost just feel or hear the audience like, wait, but what about emergencies? Like my phone is my safety. Like if I'm going to leave the house, I need to be able to call 911.
I know.
But
what am I going to do? Yes.
Yeah,
and so that's where, there's definitely, to chime into that really quick, there's definitely techniques. And again, I've tapped into a lot of either business organizations that help businesses do this or personal. And there's ways to do that, but it's just you have to take steps first, like what you're talking about, at least take a break from tech enough, right, to where you can realize there's an addiction, a level of addiction, and then go from there as far as where to go from here.
Yeah, and
right?
I remember
And so talk
you
to experts like
mentioning,
yourself.
like, I remember you mentioning personally changing, your smartphone to a flip phone where you can still make phone calls. Texting is maybe a little bit more pain, but like you can make those necessary phone calls in emergency cases, but then you don't have that like, oh, I'm gonna now scroll or access the internet or do that, and that can help cut back and really hone in on what the purpose of a phone is, which is to call people and to connect instead of getting soaked in on the games and the social media. But to your point, I definitely have been guilty of that. I like to think I'm not addicted, right? We all do. Like I have clients who come in and they're like, yeah, I drink this many times a day or I smoke my weed, but I'm not addicted. I could quit anytime. And it's like, okay, but you never know if you actually can unless you give it a go. Like if you say you can quit anytime, but you never quit anytime, then how are you going to know whether or not you're actually addicted? And I had someone who tried stopping and they were like, okay, this is like a lot harder than I really anticipated. And it's the same with technology. Like if you're like, well, I'm not addicted to it, just remove it for, like you said, a day and see like how your physical body like reacts. Like your brain keeps redirecting you to try to pick it up, or you just like feel empty, or you feel like depressed because you're like, I can't.
And Emily, I'm so glad you said that too, because in my own journey, right, like it's actually a phone, still a phone, but it doesn't have any social media or internet. For the first 30 days, Emily, I thought it was pretty good because I don't doom scroll, right? Like I don't endlessly scroll. But
that's nice for you. I'm guilty.
Mark had an addiction because I struggled. I was like, I can't get rid of my Samsung though, because just in case I need it. And it took me 90 days to actually get rid of that. And I always tell people that's not a path for everybody. But to your point, just try it. Like stop doing weed, stop doing drugs, stop doing food binging, right? If you really don't have an addiction, and see for yourself, what's the worst case? You're going to go back to what you're doing, right? But at least if it can help your relationships and give you better quality of life, why not? Right? Why not?
Right.
Because
like, do you want
to
be happy? Do you want to have good mental health? Do you want to have good relationships? Obviously, yes, but it doesn't come easily. So, like, you got to do the work. So, do it. Even though it's hard. Like, you just
it's hard. It's hard.
Just do
it. Yeah. Just do it. Take a step. Like I always tell my wife, I always encourage my wife, it's not that you have to be successful. Just take a step. Right. Yes. And I try to refrain from baby step because that sounds like a little like, that's not enough. No, just take a step. Right? That's all you have to do. And then the rest will happen. And in fact, speaking of that, part of a program is talking about creating new habits. So habits take a while, right? So if you just do one little baby step, and I appreciate those examples you gave, if you just take a break and see what happens, what's the worst case? You know what I mean? Hopefully you're right and you're not wrong.
Probably got more, you were probably more productive, honestly. So
yeah.
The irony even of what I do is I am here trying to be mindful about my technology use and advocate like here are the effects of it, and then by doing that I also get sucked into that. So even just starting my YouTube channel, I was like, okay, subscribers, views, like people liking, people commenting, and I would get so into that as I'm trying to build up this platform to get to a place of influence so that I can influence people to use their time better or be more mindful of the effects of it. And I got to experience like firsthand what it's like to get sucked into that and start putting more importance to likes and putting more importance to comments than just what I'm doing. And what I was doing became less fulfilling. Like I would question myself more and doubt myself, and like, how can people really want to see me if like I'm not even getting people watching me on YouTube? Like it just messed with my mind and warped my expectations and brought me away from focusing on what really matters, which is just that one-on-one personal connection with clients. And so it's a real trap, and I think that's why I can be so vulnerable, is because I've been there, and that's how you get through it, is by realizing you're not alone in that place. And our fear of being vulnerable keeps us lonely and keeps us isolated.
Oh yeah, because I mean, what you just described is what everybody's, succumbing to, and that's why I get passionate about this space because it's just frustrating, right? Because it's like we don't have to just rely on the likes and even like I did a Vimeo instead of YouTube thing, and I hate to say it, but when I saw I only got one little like, I was like, oh geez, Yeah, I mean it's just unfortunately that's the way all these most of them are designed, and that's where we come in, right? To educate people that hey, you don't have to be in that lane. It's like a diet, right? If you just
So
focus
real.
on the key things, right,
Because
and
if
and
you
then
go to
it's
the grocery
easier.
store without your list and without that accountability, I am only going for this purpose, then
Mm-hmm.
you end up buying, well, I don't know about you, but I end up buying chocolate. I'm like, that was not on the
Oh, I
that
know.
was not the plan. Why
I
did
love
I come home
chocolate
with all
too,
this
so
chocolate?
yes.
It's like, dang it, and like this treats and the so yeah, just
Yes.
having a plan is so
Mhm.
crucial. And I kind of want to just transition into how this has become even more of a hot topic with the introduction and accessibility of artificial intelligence, and
Mhm.
specifically how AI has been made to like mimic relationships. And I did a previous video like a month or two ago, I don't even remember, but I just talked about like, can AI replace therapy? Because I was doom scrolling on
Oh
my
wow.
Instagram and I came across
Okay.
this lady and she's like, yeah, with the economy, like I had to quit therapy. And I was like, oh,
Oh
ChatGPT, let me
jeez.
just talk to ChatGPT like it's my therapist. And she's like, and guys, I'm never going back. I like ChatGPT more than my therapist. And
Oh
internally, I
jeez, that's
almost had this
scary.
like crisis of like, oh no, I'm gonna be out of a job. But then I like paused and I was like,
Mhm.
okay, if ChatGPT was better than your therapist, like you, it makes me question that therapist a little bit. But
Mhm.
not to be
Yeah.
judgmental, but it just made
Yeah.
me realize the
Mhm.
importance of human connection, and there is an aspect of therapy that cannot be replaced by AI, that human to human regulating of emotions and realistic
Mhm.
expectation and truth. And that is something that
Mhm.
AI cannot replicate because it's not living, it's not alive, it doesn't have the spirit of God in it to
Yes.
guide
Yes.
it from
Mhm.
right and wrong. It just does what it's told to do.
You just hit it on the nail as far as like your own like fear per se, like oh my gosh, I'm gonna be out of a job, which I've fallen prey to that too at different business stuff. But the key is that um, the story that I'm actually going to bring up says that no, you're never going to be out of a job because unfortunately, AI, the character AI, which is the latest, is dealing with the psychology of a person, right? So, for
Mm.
example, it'll ask Emily, "Hey, Emily, I noticed that you're struggling with not watching K-pop the other day. How's that going for you?" And you're like, oh, I forgot about that. I feel better about myself. And it'll talk to you very relationally. And what's scary about it, Emily, is the fact that not only that, but if you don't like certain aspects of that character you've created, you could just shut it off and keep tailoring it to how you want it to react to you. And so, like, if you struggle in an area, right, it's going to develop into this person that's not even healthy, to your point. And for example, and it's a blog that I did, like you said, and this poor lady who's a middle class lady family, um, they're very intentional with technology. They tell all the warnings to the kids, like, hey, watch out, because not everybody's real online. In fact, the teenage son knew that this character AI wasn't real, but he still had a hard time of separating real world versus the character AI world to the point where the character AI world was more real.
Mm.
And so then he wanted to be with in that world, right? He's tired of being with this crazy world that was real, and he
Yeah.
committed suicide in his family's bathroom. And so I say that because it's real. And not only that, guess what, Emily? This last Thanksgiving, my niece's son came and he just got a smartphone, and this is still surreal for me to say this because it happens in my family. He was like, hey, he was telling my wife, he goes, yeah, he goes, I was on this game the other day and there was this AI thing that popped up and it said, hey, Zach, we really missed you the other day. Where were you? And he goes, that was weird and creepy. So I just shut it down. And I thought, well, that saved him from that one moment, but it's obviously being integrated into different parts of our culture. And it's not the character AI platform, which has 20 million users,
Yeah.
But and unfortunately, the psychology part, even though it says on the website, and I went on the website, and it says that if there's any kind of alarming thing like suicide or whatever, they'll report that. But in this case, this kid mentioned that several times, and they never reported it. And so it's just really nothing to be like, oh my gosh, doom and gloom, go hide under a rock. But like I always tell people, hey, educate yourself. Now that you're aware of some of these things, keep educating yourself, and then go to, again, a good counselor like Emily, and walk through these things. Because if you're dealing with, like, to your point, something that's not real, it's never going to be like a human being, period, in the story.
Yeah, so. And just to your point, it reminds me of a research article I did in my undergrad years. And this is a topic I'm so passionate about. So I'm sure in like future videos, I'm going to dive deeper. But you sparked like this memory of me writing this passion project. And so for a whole semester, for 4 months, we were writing one giant research paper. And she's like, pick something you're passionate about because you're going to be writing this all semester long. And I like didn't know. I was like, what am I even? I almost had like an identity crisis. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm passionate about. And I eventually was like, I love reading. And all throughout my teenage years, I loved escaping into books. And even though it wasn't a smartphone, it was a platform of media that engaged me, that I would prefer reading to socializing. Like, I don't want to go to my church activity and talk to the people over there. Like, I just want to read my book in the corner. Like, that was me as like a young teenager. Right? And so I remember my mom always making comments like, the guys in those books are not realistic. They're written by women. Like, that's giving you a false expectation. And so I just remembered that. Like, I'm passionate about reading, and I'm curious how that influences my psychology. And so I started researching, and I came across the most mind-blowing phenomenon, which is called a parasocial romantic relationship. And as I dived more and more into the research, just like you were saying, you're forming emotional attachments to fictional or unreal people or characters, and that can have very detrimental effects. And so in this research paper, I researched how, well, especially vulnerable is adolescents, because if you think about it, like as adults, we kind of have our heads on, maybe, hopefully, and we like know how the world works. We've had a lot of relationships, hopefully, and so we kind of know how the real world works. But as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, like you're still developing with puberty, your hormones are fluctuating. Like this is your playground to explore what it is like to love and to have an emotional connection with someone as you're like blooming. And so many people turn to books and TV shows as a way to like crush on this celebrity because it's safe. Like they're not ever going to be hurt or rejected because that person's not real. And so they think it's like this safe playground to like explore what it's like to really like and obsess over someone. But then the detrimental effects that come from that, because that person isn't real. They can't reciprocate in a realistic way. And so you start developing unrealistic expectations and unrealistic experiences of what romance is like that simply does not live up to reality. Like your boyfriend is not going to remember every significant date. Like the date you first got together, your 100 days of being together. Like he might remember the anniversary. Like, but AI can because it's a computer, so like it has a database to pull from, and so it just creates such an unrealistic expectation that then leads to lower satisfaction in your relationships. Oh, well, he's not as cute as Mr. Darcy, so not worth it. Or, oh, he's not as romantic as this character in my book. Or, and so you're less loyal because you're like, I have other options or other avenues to get my emotional needs filled instead of doing the work to get closer to your partner. And it can decrease sexual satisfaction or just like there's so many avenues. So mentally, emotionally, physically, it can detriment your idea of relationships and your ability to be in healthy relationships. And so this was like a huge passion project that I wrote, and like my takeaway was I still like reading, but let's just be mindful and aware of the impact, and like parents, be aware of this as you are giving your kids even harmless, like, oh well, it's not screen, it's paper, like here you go as a book, but just being aware of these different things that can really, really mess up your kids, I guess. But again,
Yes,
kids
for
are
sure.
resilient, and I like to put this plug in there because I never like to guilt parents, because like I trust parents are doing the best they can with what they have, and we have different
Sure.
levels of resources, and so I just
Mm-hmm.
always like to throw out there, kids are resilient, and they can come back and change and be moldable, and so you haven't ruined your kids
Awesome.
permanently. I just like to
Right.
throw that plug out there, but just be mindful and just
Well,
be aware.
yeah, and I appreciate you saying that too, because I'll do a plug too of technologies. I always like to, when in our program it lists the top searches, I always like to tell people, first of all, don't feel ashamed, right? Just
Yes.
know that technology is not helping you in your struggles. So a little plug too, because you're right. I mean, it's amazing how our thought processes can be more destructive to ourselves
Yes.
than just even somebody like yourself talking to us and making us realize that no, I mean, kids, they were created in a way that, like you said, they can bounce back. But at least as a parent, hopefully you're constantly trying to learn and change yourself, right? Because I'm sure you've heard the books where they talk about it. We've read all the how to do things with kids, and it's funny how they're always going back to they don't. Well, start with yourself first, and it's like, oh yeah,
Yes, it
I guess
is.
because we're the ones that are training them.
Like, we're the models. So the most important
Yes.
thing I could do for my kid is to take good care of myself, to model
Mm-hmm.
what self-love is,
Absolutely.
to model what a healthy relationship is.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's
and that if that's
awesome.
all you do, right? If all you do is just be a good person to yourself, that is enough for being
Mm. Mm.
modeling to
Mm.
your kid. Yeah.
Yes, for
So
sure.
I love that.
Yeah, because you can't be perfect, right? It's like forget perfection.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's
But
not
I
gonna
just,
happen.
and again,
So that's good.
I that's why I draw on faith so much, is because God
Mm.
put us here at this time. He knew this is what
Yes.
technology would be like, and He prepared
Mm.
us and gave us the power and the tools to deal with it. And He knew it would be a
Mm.
struggle. So it's, of course, it's not easy, but we have the power within
Mm.
us, and our kids are prepared to be
Mm.
in this time. And so just
Mm.
remembering and really trusting Him and His plan can really help to
Yes.
hopefully take away some of that shame, because that
Yes.
is, like you said, such a big theme in most all of my therapy sessions. We get to a place of self shame, and that self shame is
Mm.
actually just a block to growth, because you're so busy
Mm.
beating up on yourself and feeling guilty about
Mm-hmm.
everything that it not
Mm-hmm.
only hinders you from growing, but it hinders you from connecting to another person, because as their
That's right.
words come to you and you immediately go to shame, then you're not offering them the support they need, or being able to help them, or they're just going to feel bad for coming to you and not want to come to you if you just immediately go to shame. And so it's
Right.
challenging, and I find
Mm.
myself in that trap too. And so there's definitely
Mm.
some areas here for us all to work on. But just as we're ending with this, um, what do we do about this, right? Like, this can be such an overwhelming problem, and it's like, I'm just one person. I can't fix the whole world. I can't go after the creator of technology and be like, fix these things, change these things.
It's your problem.
Right. Like, what do I do? Because
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm that person that's like, okay, now I know more about this problem, and what do I do?
That was.
But
Yeah.
it starts with us, like each individually
Mm-hmm.
being mindful and
Mm-hmm.
making choices, acting on technology, choosing, like, okay, I'm going into my phone with a purpose, and I
Mm-hmm.
am going to do that, and then I'm going to put my phone down, instead of it acting on us and us going into our phone and then 2 hours later, like, oh man, not again.
Oh, jeez. I know.
Yeah.
Those Koreans.
Ah, they're just too good. They're just too
Really.
cute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to hear your vulnerability throughout the interview, because that's the key, right? Is to be vulnerable enough with yourself to realize that, hey, maybe I should take a look at, a different view, right? And see if there's something to this. And so you're right. Yeah, we have different things that help people basically navigate these different things, such as a reset tech kit.
Yeah,
So for
because
sure.
like we were saying too,
Mm-hmm.
like, this is hard to do on your own. the very thing that we're struggling with is because it's in isolation. If we had community, if we had support, like-minded people that could hold us accountable, buoy us up in those moments of weakness, I think we could do it a little bit more easier. And that's kind of all what you're based about, right? What you do is you help people navigate that and support them in that. And so I just wanted to maybe ask people viewing this, if they're curious, wanting to learn more, like how can they find you and find out more about what you do?
So Navigating Tech Family is our company. And so they can look us up online, and we've got all sorts of resources on there.
Okay, I can visit your website and get some help if they want.
Yes.
To see
yes,
just
for
how
sure.
much it's impacting.
They want to take a step.
Yeah, just a step. Like you don't have to burn your smartphone. Just
yes, absolutely.
Maybe use your smartphone to go to the website.
Yeah. In fact, I'll give a little freebie out there for your audience. I do this privately with people, but there's a thing called a Panasonic sell the link. That is one small little tip that will be a game changer for people. Because what you do is you end up putting your cell phone down by the unit, and then your calls from the time you set it. Let's say you get home from work, you set your cell phone down. From that until the morning time, you just don't access your smartphone. So something like that even is going to be a game changer for people to realize the effects, as well as have a little bit more balance, because it'll still get your incoming calls, as well as it'll announce your text messages for you in your practice. Like if you're waiting for that special client that maybe you said, hey, I'll be available, you won't miss those types of things, but at least you can have a little bit of a break from text. So there's a little freebie for your audience to try out.
Okay, and I'll make sure to include the website in the description box below so that people can access the links and find out more information if they're curious.
Cool. Sounds good. And again, appreciate this awareness of technology, because a lot of people, they understand the ramifications, but just don't understand the seriousness of how it can hinder, right, their relationship. So thank you.
And thank you for this collaboration, for joining me today. This is so valuable. And just thank you for wanting to do good in this world, for wanting to encourage and help other people. That's all we can hope for, is just doing that for each other. So thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. We'll see ya.
Okay, we'll see you. Bye.